Let's take things back to late 2019 to early 2020 for myself, right? My 8th grade year in middle school. At this point, I'm 14 years old and have sort of accepted myself as being more the introverted or different sort of kid. I had very particular hobbies that stole all of my attention and essentially all my focus at the time. For example, I participated in this one very indoorsy hobby that stole pretty much all of my focus. And this was a take on the bottle flip trend from 2016 that actually used markers instead of bottles to flip. I know this is super weird and everything like that, but it was something that I genuinely enjoyed doing and I was fairly good at it. But since this was a more weird hobby, since I was the only person I physically knew who was doing it, I was made fun of for it a lot at school. People knew I did it, and that made me sort of an easy target for any sort of teasing or belittlement. But once the pandemic hit around March of my 8th grade year, I got news that I had been accepted into a high school that would allow me to go to school with a whole new group of people. And this sort of sparked something off inside of my brain. Like, I felt as though I had something to prove. I had to prove to myself and others that I could be taken seriously, I could be someone who could be looked up to, and I would be someone who would make others proud. So I decided to try and go about this by molding my personality to fit with whoever I was interacting with back when I started going there in September of 2020. I tried to act and talk in ways that I found were similar to how they interacted, and I really just tried to push myself a lot to fit that mold. Now let me get something out of the way here first and foremost. I'm a very introverted and very individualistic type of person. So me doing this was very unlike me, right? It was very out of my comfort zone, which I guess was good in a way, but at the same time, I didn't know what it meant to really embrace this more introverted side of myself. I didn't know the power behind being able to focus on something so intently over a long period of time to the point that you couldn't think about anything else, right? That's all you could think about. And you know, at times I tried to suppress this feeling, right? I would waste time. At various points throughout the years, I tried to fit in with other people, all that sort of stuff. But in a way, I was able to contact that very focused and ambitious side of myself when it came to doing things that were hard. You know, I did martial arts training up to the point that I got my black belt, which requires months and months of very rigorous physical training. And I had a lot of setbacks and things that annoyed me about that. And then I was doing cross country on top of it as well. And the thing I hated most about the martial arts training was the humiliation side of it, right? And I think that would make sense for a lot of people. That wasn't what ultimately drove me away from the sport altogether, right? I had a lot of bad relationships with certain people. I wasn't treated the best there. And so that sort of drove me away from it altogether. Usually, I would say I'm one to have a pretty good idea of what's best for myself personally in terms of self-growth. So I decided that if I was going to continue going to this place and having these experiences, it was sort of going to hold me back from reaching my full potential ultimately. You know, having those fears or worrying about something so much can be enough for a person to stop trying altogether. You have to, at least for me, find a place where people are positive, like we're nailing down the growth, we're working hard, but we're in a positive environment, right? Not one where you're getting humiliated in front of up to 100 people, or you're getting in pretty intense, at times, physical altercations with 1 or 2 particular adults. And without having that social pressure on me anymore, I was able to have more of this freeing feeling, which allowed me to push beyond what I thought was even possible for myself at the time. I got myself to the point where I was running up to 40+ miles a week, doing free calisthenics and free ab workouts each week. I was taking primarily cold showers. And in just a matter of a few months, I went from the kid who would fall asleep on the bus every morning coming in to the kid who would be hitting 20-minute meditations every morning on the bus. And I doubt I would have done all this if not for the freedom I had to do it at the time. Instead of caring so much about what people would have thought of me for quitting the sport of karate at the time, I was able to really dial in on fitness and self-improvement. And that therefore accumulated more growth within myself than I could have accumulated otherwise. By not having really almost any friends at the time, right, not having any outside influence, I was able to have plenty of time to myself during that summer as well. But because I was doing all these things that no one else was doing, it sort of molded my personality into something that was made fun of by some particular groups of people at the time. I was very focused, very rigid, and that wasn't a common way to be at that particular age. I was in classes with a lot of rowdy people who were all friends with each other, and that pissed me off so much. And I didn't restrain from showing that. I made it very clear when I was annoyed with people and all that sort of stuff. And so this made me even more different from pretty much everyone else around me at the time as well. And I felt very isolated at the time. I dropped down to 127 pounds while trying to go all in on running. I was very drained, I was very burnt out, and I just felt very alone. I felt as though I needed to be more in tune with the people around me, and I was sick of myself. So that caused me to binge eat. I gained 20 pounds in a month, fell back into like all my old ways, and that was that. Now I can contribute almost the vast majority of this to my previous deprivation of food intake at the time, right? I was running up to like 10 miles a day and eating 2,000 calories. But I can also contribute it to me just hating feeling alone and becoming sick of who I was. And so that goes back to me again, just sort of wanting to fit in better. I made little bits of progress once I overcame that binge eating period, right? There was a lot going on that month that sort of pushed me down into this sort of depression stage that went on for a couple months. But I was putting a lot of energy into caring about what other people might think of me, right? My anxiety started going up, I started becoming insecure, all that sort of stuff. And those two things alone are enough to hinder lots of progress or potential for anyone in that situation, in my opinion. At one point I was eating very unhealthy because eating healthy was not much of a priority for myself at that point. And I was just putting on like this persona for other people to sort of mask who I truly was. I was putting all that energy that could have been put towards great things for myself into those types of things. And don't get me wrong, right? I was still doing pretty consistently well at the time. I ended up finishing high school off with all A's, which I'd never done before. I was still one of the most consistent runners for the teams at my school, and I was somewhat consistent with the bodyweight workouts. Kind of fell off of those like 2 months in, was doing it 3 times a week to 2. But besides that, I was doing okay. But I knew what my fullest potential really was. I knew I was someone who had the ability to channel essentially all their focus and energy into something worthwhile that could not only benefit themselves, but also at that point other people. And at the time I was going into a field of work that I wasn't very enthusiastic about, right? You know, it's work, what can you expect? But this particular field was very difficult. I wanted to stay in it because, you know, there was decent money. People around me were proud of it for it. I wanted to impress people, and I wanted to prevent anyone from thinking anything bad of me. Right after high school was when I started going full-time with this, and this is when I began to slowly hate my life more and more each and every day. I was given a hard time every single day, up to multiple times a day at work, and I had a pretty horrible experience trying out that field for the first time. Little to no friends, hardly anyone was in contact with me during that entire summer. I just felt very alone in my struggle. So it turned out in the end that none of that friendship shit mattered as much as I thought it did. And at the time, no one really cared about what I was doing. So I said, fuck it. I quit my job. I then fell in some hard times, which I allowed to bring myself up, which I hadn't done in a while. I started a YouTube channel based off my weird little interest in self-improvement, and here we are today. People look up to me more now, I believe, than when I was working that job. I've helped numerous people, which I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And at the same time, I'm building up a platform that could be potentially very profitable one day. I try to stay in contact and hang out with very few people, and I wouldn't have it any other fucking way, bro. So the best piece of advice I can give from me to you is to embrace who you truly are. Embrace it to the point that you may be different from everyone else around you, and stay true to that. Because you never know where that could take you one day. You never know how much potential you truly have until you wholeheartedly embrace that side of you. I hope this message helped you today, my friend. Keep putting in that work each and every day to becoming at least 1% better, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.